So I'm Marcus Idle. I'm one of the practice heads at Third Space. I'm also going to be joined at the end in the Q&A by Julie Oron, who's a senior program manager with the Microsoft engineering group, but I'll introduce her in the Q&A. And today we're going to be covering Azure Active Directory, B2B and B2C, and making the technology choice that's right for you. So just in the last few years, there have been a lot of changes to the way external identity is done, not just at Microsoft, but everywhere. And so it sometimes can be confusing making a technology choice that's right for your scenario. In Microsoft's case, obviously, Active Directory was born in about the year 2000, and that morphed into ADFS for connecting external identities, and then finally into Azure Active Directory, which is now a great way of signing on external identities as well as your own corporate identities. In the consumer world, many websites traditionally, and many still do, have an internal database of credentials, and so they're kind of living in the equivalent of the kind of closed-off environment of traditional Active Directory. Because they don't connect with other systems, they don't allow single sign-on, and they don't allow what's called modern auth, which is a modern standardized way of doing authentication that gives you security constraints and controls. Because when you do authentication by yourself as a web developer, you're not really necessarily keeping up with standards or responding to threats and new loopholes that have been opened up. So what people have done recently is use protocols like OpenID Connect and SAML to ensure that authentication is done right, and at the same time open up the authentication provider, the identity provider, to be used in single sign-on scenarios, so to be used across different websites. And Microsoft have created Microsoft Azure AAD B2C, which does just that. So the issue here is, although we've got the name B2B, business to business, and B2C, business to consumer or customer, it's not always correct to use B2B for business to business relationships, for example. So the B2B and B2C names are names of technologies, and sometimes we end up advising clients to use the B2C technology in a B2B scenario. So we need to understand the kind of nature of the relationship between you and your external identities, the number of users we're talking about, the type of onboarding, how they're signing up or signing in for the first time, and the type of interactions they'll have with you. So we're going to go into that in more detail today. So let's talk about B2B first of all. We have a problem, many businesses, of having lots of applications that we want lots of external people to be able to use with us and collaborate with us. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we're being secure. We're not allowing identities in when they shouldn't. And we're kind of protecting our resources and protecting the external identities as well. So this is a kind of typical scenario where you want to do business with externals. Albert here works for an IT company, any kind of company in IT, and he needs to provide Angela, an external user, with access to, for example, a dashboard. So in the past, that's been done with native accounts. So an account for Angela has been created in the local Active Directory with a username and password. Angela's been able to then log on to the application. That's all very well, but it ends up being Corpco that needs to look after that username and password. If Angela leaves TinyCo, her company, that username and password hasn't changed. She's still got access. So it can end up with some messy housekeeping. So this problem has been solved in the past with ADFS, so Active Directory Federation Services. So this is a system whereby Angela's credentials stay in her TinyCo Active Directory. When she tries to access an application, she's bounced back to her ADFS server to log in, but then the local AD, the local resources, will control her access. But what this requires is for each company involved in this scenario to have their own ADFS infrastructure, servers and firewalls, and to set up a new relationship with every new company that gets involved in federation like this. So it's complex and it's costly. So we have the two scenarios of local identities, which get messy, and federation, which can be very complex and cost a lot of money. So what Microsoft have done with collaboration is, based on Azure Active Directory, enabled IT administrators to invite external users. The externals can have Azure Active Directory, they don't have to, but ideally they have Azure Active Directory and they'll get an email invite. They are able to then click on the invitation and access the application that they've been invited through to. Their credentials stay in their own Azure Active Directory. What happens is that they're bounced to their Active Directory to sign in. That returns a token to the host Azure Active Directory that it can trust once it's unpacked, and then finally the host sends a token back to the web application. So, and the web application has a trust relationship with the host AAD, so it can unpack and understand and trust that token. So it's a kind of token-based authentication. So the B2B user will see something like this, a sign-in screen, unless they're already signed in, of course. Once they type their email address, they'll see if they've got Active Directory themselves in their organization. They will see their own organization's logo and so on. And then finally, once they've gone through that, and once they've put in a password or gone through password lists, if they've got that set up, they'll get to the application itself or to the My App screen, which we're looking at here. So in addition to this relationship you can establish with externals, you can then use some of Azure Active Directory's identity governance features to control and invite them. So first of all, conditional access. So that's not just for your employees, that can be used for all of your B2B guest users. So this is a way of understanding the threat level or understanding other factors such as whereabouts in the world the user is logging in, and then making a response to that threat level. So a lot of data is analyzed by Microsoft to understand the threat level posed by the user in the session, and you can make use of this and then make a decision based on that to allow access, allow limited access, for example, require MFA, and so on. So this is a way of, as we said before, securing your resources and also looking after those identities, making sure that identity theft isn't a problem for your corporate and your guest users. Another way of inviting them in, besides the initial email invitation that we talked about, is to use a feature called Entitlement Management. Within that, we create something called an access package, which can provide access to a bunch of resources, so groups, applications, and SharePoint sites. And this can be provided out to your external users, and they can go in and apply for access and then get approval. So as an IT admin, I create an access package in the first place, give it a name. I decide what groups, applications, and SharePoint sites I'm giving access to by putting someone in this package. Set up a process for approval, so you can have internal users and external users as approvers. You can have multiple approvers so that those who apply for access don't have to wait a long time. and then you can provide that link to your externals. So they get something that looks like this. So in this case, what we're seeing is an external user asking for access to something called branding. You can require them to put a reason in for their access, a justification, and then they hit submit. And then if you've set up an approval process, your approvers will see this, or a list of users that require approval, and they'll be able to approve or deny. So why do it this way? You may not wish to for your external users to wait if they're part of a team and a few of them need access and you don't know who they are, but your external partner does. You might want them to apply for access when they're ready, not when you're ready to invite them. So obviously, including externals, you can have multiple approvers, and you might want to package up a bunch of resources so you can simplify the onboarding process, but also the offboarding process. So when you need to remove access from people, you can remove it all at once by just removing them from the access package. And then we have another feature of Azure Identity Governance, access reviews. So these are a way of checking on a regular basis whether people should still have access. So as you can see on the left-hand side, you can do different things based on the result of an access review. You can require a reason for approval, you can enable or disable, or you can just report, okay, so-and-so hasn't responded, or so-and-so's declined access. The people who receive the access reviews, they can be the actual members of the group that you're reviewing, or the access package that you're reviewing, or they can be specific other people or owners of an access package or a group. So you can trust the end users to say they still need access, or depending on the scenario, you can ask other people to verify their access. And then you can set up access reviews on a regular basis and give them different windows to respond in and so on. So again, starting from the IT admin's perspective, this is how you would create an access review, give it a name, give it a frequency, and so on. Once the access review has gone out, people will get an email to say, please review your access. Again, you can be asked for justification, and the approver can be asked to approve, and you get a report out of it at the end. So some of the reasons you might need an access review is you've got too many users in privileged roles, or you're redefining the purpose of a group. Sometimes organizations have lots of disparate groups, and they need to be repurposed. You could be asking group owners whether they still need access, or just removing redundant users who you believe are no longer in the organization or need access to any of it. Finally, terms of use. This is a way of just setting up a legal agreement between you and your external users, or you can do it for internals as well. So again, you can require users to review and accept terms of use before they log into a specific application or device, and you can do it on a regular basis. You can set these terms of use up, and then require them using conditional access. So conditional access is the control mechanism for getting people to accept terms of use, and you can report on who's accepted them. So as I said, the reason for doing this would be a legal agreement between parties. It's not a technical thing. It doesn't have a technical effect other than you can require the user to accept it before going into an application. So let's move on to B2C. B2C in a nutshell is an authentication mechanism like Azure Active Directory. It gets so when you have users who need to access your web applications, they'll arrive on your web application, and if they need to get into an area where they need to be authenticated, they'll be bounced to an authentication experience, in this case B2C. That can use a username and password to authenticate them. That's stored in the B2C directory. It's called a local account. Or it can use one of many social identity providers or external identity providers to do the authentication and then return a token to B2C. The token is basically passed back to the user's browser, and then the browser obviously passes it on to B2C. And once that's happened, the application can, the browser passes it on to the application, and the application unpacks the token and lets the user in. So the out-of-the-box B2C front page looks like this. So here we've got 4 different social providers: Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and Facebook, and the option of logging in with a local account as well. This, however, can be completely customized. So unlike the AAD experience we saw earlier, you can put this in your own corporate colors. You can modify every pixel on the screen. So it's completely customizable experience. B2C has sort of 3 pillars in the Microsoft world. So they believe it's customer centric and flexible. That's because you know, they're offering customers these different methods of login, customizable interactions as well, which we'll see in a minute. Making the experience more positive, making sure you get less dropout sessions and so on. It's very secure and reliable, so it provides this very secure front door to your authentication experience. It only uses standard protocols, which have a lot of accreditations from organizations around the world, governments and security organizations and standards bodies. And you can even do the conditional access that we talked about earlier. So that's now available in B2C, and you can understand the threat level before you continue with any transaction. And it's ready for any business because it's very scalable. You start with a free level of use, so 50,000 monthly active users, and then it scales up to essentially any number. You can interact with your line of business applications, and you've got code libraries for integrating any kind of web and mobile application. So why do people choose B2C? Essentially, they don't want to be in the identity management business. We saw on the first slide that idea of a web application having its own credential store. That is out of date. We don't do that if you want to be secure. So if you want someone else to take care of the nuts and bolts of that and the scalability and reliability that Microsoft Azure provides, then you need to choose B2C. It's got built-in multi-factor authentication as part of that logging experience, and it's compliant with GDPR principles. Another reason is to connect customers to all of our systems. So in other words, to reduce silos, either across the front end or back end front end. To connect up that customer experience, make sure that your customized, your look and feel is the same across your web application and your authentication experience. Integrating new stuff. So B2C is very standards based. It's able to integrate you know, back end and front end systems and using standard protocols. And finally, people want their customers to have a better experience. So as I mentioned, customizable user experience, standard out-of-the-box policies. So policy in B2C is user journeys such as sign in, sign up, edit profile, change my password. And these are all available out of the box, and you can create advanced ones, which we'll see in a minute. Translations are available in many languages out of the box. And of course, we've mentioned social identity providers. So just to show you the power of advanced policies in B2C, we have a customer who's an insurance firm based in Germany, started back in the 1910s, and they wanted to venture into the online world. They hadn't had online account management when they came to us, although they were one of the largest insurers in Europe. But they wanted existing customers to be able to sign in and see their stuff straight away. So they wanted a way of identifying existing customers through the sign-up journey. First of all, they wanted the new user to accept their terms and conditions, then to prove who they were, so they can connect them with their account, then to set up username, password, and MFA, and finally they would sign in and see their documents. So as I said, unlike with AAD out of the box and B2B, you can customize these by adding steps to the user journey. So this is the accept my terms and conditions step, and then we've got verify who you are, so put in an activation code, an account number, and a birth date, and we'll check with the backend system whether this matches up. After this point, we know exactly who the user is. So then we say, can you set up some credentials so that you can log in again? So at this point, they put in their email address. They put in a verification code that's sent to their email so that we know we can trust that email address. They choose a password, set up MFA, and then they're in. So how do we compare B2B and B2C, and how do we make a choice between them? So B2B is a feature of Azure Active Directory. It involves putting guest users in the same directory as your employees so they can share the same kinds of access to groups, for example. It's designed for collaboration, including with Office 365. B2C, on the other hand, is a separate directory, so not to be confused with the B2B model. Your employees won't live in that directory, only the B2C admins. And it's typically designed for larger communities of user. So what's the user lifecycle like? Well, with B2B, B2B is good for lifecycle management if you trust your external partner organization to remove their users, for example, if they leave the organization. So that will take care of removing their access. B2B is an invite-only model. So although with access packages, you can now share a link and users can apply for access, but essentially it's invitation-based. B2C, on the other hand, involves social logins, so there's no kind of user lifecycle management unless you impose one. It can rely on Azure Active Directory as an identity provider. So like the social identity providers like Facebook, Amazon, and Google, you can add Azure Active Directory as one of those. So you can start with a B2C journey and you can essentially make a hybrid journey that involves AAD. But the out-of-the-box model is sign up. Again, you could superimpose something else on top, and in the past we've done an invitation model on top of B2C. And finally, the user experience. So B2B user interface isn't customizable, and you can't add steps to the user journey, whereas with B2C, as you've seen, you can. So this presentation wouldn't be complete without talking about convergence a little bit. So you know, there are organizations that say, why do I have to make a decision between B2B and B2C? And Microsoft has understood that and has given us some indications that convergence is coming between B2C and B2B. It'll be, generally speaking, based on the B2B model, but we'll start to see the kind of B2C user flows and other features coming into B2B. However, we don't have a timeline for that at the moment. The bottom line is you need to choose B2C if you want complex user journeys today, if you want a customized look and feel, or if you need social logins. However, choose B2B if you want to rely on your external organizations, join and move a leaver processes if you need the identity governance features we talked about, or if you need to collaborate using Office 365. But if you need all of the features, or if you need features from both sides, then you need a hybrid model. So I'm going to open to questions now. So as I mentioned, we've got Julie Oron with us, who's a senior program manager with Microsoft Corp Engineering Group. So she will also be able to answer questions if there are relevant questions. I'm just going to ask Julie. So we have some customers who want to dip their toe in the water with B2C. They want to try out a few features without committing to an enormous project. Can you tell us what options they have for doing that?
Yes, absolutely. Good morning, everybody. So we are offering you now, working with ThirdSpace, the possibility to try with 1 or 2 scenarios that interest you to try proof of concept. So the idea is for you to be able to test the platform, to test Azure AD B2C, and to be able to discover how it can be in the reality regarding use cases for your customers.
Great. And so, and the proof of concept, how would the project work?
So really simple. The idea is just to discuss and to understand the scenario you are interested in, what you want to try, like authentication with for your customers using Azure AD B2C, or how to customize the login page and everything, how to connect apps for your customers with Azure AD B2C. So these are just examples. And what we can, the process for doing that is just to contact directly ThirdSpace, and I will be the contact to work with ThirdSpace and the customer, and you actually to define the scope of the proof of concept we can do together. And then we will be able to start like meetings to define the different steps we will go through with ThirdSpace, and we will found up to $10,000 for doing this proof of concept. So we have the possibility to try interesting scenarios. It's a good opportunity actually to understand how it works and what we can do, what you can offer, and how you can leverage the usage and possibilities offered by Azure AD B2C.
Fantastic. Thanks, Julie. And yeah, so please get in touch, as Julie mentioned, and I'll provide a phone number for that in a second. I've got a couple of technical questions here. So one is, how does hybrid work? So briefly, with hybrid AAD B2B and B2C, you would have, if you can see the screen I'm putting up now, you would have a similar button to Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and Facebook. But you would have a button that says log in with your corporate login, or company name, and so on. Once you hit that, you would go through your normal sign-in. Then you would be returned to B2C. If B2C doesn't have any other questions for you, so if you haven't got a user journey that asks for other data, you would then just go straight back to the application. So it might be as simple as hit that button. If you're already signed in with AAD, then you go straight to the application. Or it could be you're not signed in, so you see this screen. Or B2C requires other information because that's the way the user journey is built, and so you're asked for other information. So it all depends, but that's that's essentially the baseline. Got another question. If the B2C directory is separate from AAD, where is it? So the B2C directory you access from the Azure portal. So when you create a B2C directory, you, the creator, become the first global admin on that directory, and then you can access it through an AAD B2C button in the Azure portal. But every other user in the directory, you have to invite in as an admin, or would be consumers who registered on the front end. Okay, I think we have to leave it there. We'll follow up any other questions that are coming in now. But thank you very much for attending. Thank you for your time today. Just a quick note about next steps. So please do get in touch with one of our sales team, and they can put you in touch with a technical expert for something called a vision call. So you can get in touch using the phone number shown here or the email, and we'll be very happy to talk to you. So once again, thank you, and thank you, Julie, for being on the call, and thank you all for attending.
Thank you.